There's a billion-dollar war in tech right now, and not enough people are actually talking about it. I'm talking about the AI coding war between OpenAI, Anthropic, and Cursor, and it is fascinating. So here's the thing. Despite all of the hype around AI, there are only a few use cases that have really found product market fit and generated serious revenue. There are a variety of reasons for this, but one of those use cases is the AI code editor. And because of how much and how quickly these AI code editors have seen success, they act as sort of a blueprint for other lagging AI use cases. Like, for example, you might see a lot of startups branding themselves now as Cursor for X, or just trying to copy something that works in the AI code editor space. Which is why I think this AI code editor war is so interesting to watch. So it all started with Cursor, which was one of the first to actually bring AI into the code editor. It's kind of crazy in hindsight, but at the time, this was revolutionary. No more copy and pasting your code. The editor had all of the context. This was so good that Cursor experienced meteoric success, becoming one of the fastest growing tech startups and completely changing the way developers will code forever. But this was the thing, Cursor wasn't actually making one of those leading coding models. They were actually heavily leveraging the models from OpenAI and Anthropic. Specifically, at the time and even now, most developers prefer Anthropic's Claude for coding. So you had this weird codependency where Cursor needed access to Claude because it was the best coding model. But Cursor's success also made it one of Anthropic's biggest revenue streams. But because Cursor was always mainly in the application layer, it was really just a matter of time before OpenAI and Anthropic wanted in on the action. At one point, I remember it was starting to be pretty apparent that Cursor was having some issues with its pricing model. It was charging $20 a month, as it always had, but their usage limits felt like they were getting increasingly more stingy and opaque. And this was when Anthropic first released Claude Code, a direct Cursor competitor, also at $20 a month, but with better usage limits. And this is when I, along with probably a lot of other developers, made the switch from Cursor to Claude Code. Sure, it wasn't as nice of an experience to code, but I was willing to give that up for higher usage limits. And later, OpenAI also followed suit. Anthropic and Claude was always the de facto option when it came to coding, so OpenAI did have some catch up to do, but they did release Codex, their version of Cursor with a very similar form factor. So at this point, I would imagine the people at Cursor were probably a little stressed. The two companies that were essentially making the AI models that were powering your platform now just became your direct competitors. There's like this running fear or joke, I guess, in the startup world right now, where every time like OpenAI or Anthropic release something, it just instantly kills the hundreds of startups that were trying to build that thing. Because how could you compete with these guys that actually own the models? And this is exactly what was happening to Cursor. So I was always wondering, what were they going to do about this? How are they going to respond? And just last week, they did. They launched Cursor 2.0. It has a whole bunch of updates, including a bunch of new features, like being able to run multiple coding agents simultaneously. And notably, they also launched their own new coding model, Composer. To be fair, they did dabble in developing a coding model of their own in the past. I think it was called Cursor Small, but it was terrible. I don't think anyone used it, so I don't really count it. And now they have Composer, which is focused on speed. Based on my own tests of it so far, it is faster, but the results are definitely like a mini Claude, which is probably why they're positioning it with this speed angle versus trying to compete head-to-head on quality. So what does all of this mean? Well, for one, I love that they're trying to compete on the model front. For us as consumers, this competition is great. Maybe we'll get better models or maybe even cheaper ones. But also, I think this is super fascinating from a startup perspective. Like, I'm so curious to see how this will play out. Like, personally, I find it hard to imagine that they'll beat Claude. Claude also has built up quite the reputation now for being the best at writing code. So I also think it'll be difficult to sway public opinion unless it totally blows it out of the water. But going the model route does seem like one of their only options, because there really isn't anything stopping Claude Code and Codex to just continue copying whatever they see that works. Personally, I feel like what I care about is how can I get the most Claude usage for the cheapest amount of money, the exact application I need to work around and learn how to use, I can figure all of that out. For me, it just comes down to usage limits and price. But who knows? What do you think? Who do you think will end up on top? And do you think other startups will now start to adopt this defensive strategy against OpenAI and Anthropic by releasing their own models? Or is it all a hopeless endeavor trying to compete with OpenAI and Anthropic? Let me know. But that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.